All right, guys, don't tell Clack, but I've snuck back into his shop because I just had to play around with the Lasermatic MK2. So I had to drive 1,100 miles. I want to check out this machine. We're going to be playing around with a few materials. So let's just see what comes with it and what I think of the machine after I finally get a chance to play around with it. So stay tuned. We're going to do some playing. All right, so if you followed my channel for a while, you know that I really like 3mm Baltic birch as kind of one of my standard materials. So I run a lot of tests with that. So I did a cut test and an engraved test, and just looking at this, and then of course I'm in Clack shop, so I got to run millimeters a second. So what this came out at is I started out at 7mm a second, and it cut out at 70 through 100% power, and then we squeaked out at 10mm a second. At 100% power as well. So, millimeters a minute, we'd be looking at 600 on that top end, and somewhere around 350 to 400 on the low end. So that's pretty good for this 3mm Baltic birch. This is denser plywood, and so it tends to be a little bit thicker to cut through. And then looking at our engraved test, got a nice gradient here, and started out as low as 100mm a second, going on up to 400mm a second. Definitely getting a nice gradient. We've got some nice dark colors all along this side. The big difference here is down at the bottom. It's I think it went through almost a third of the material there at 100% power. And so if you want to have that deep engraved look, maybe you want to do a little bit of color inlay with, some really thin epoxy type stuff. This is a machine that's going to be able to blast through some material and clean that out for you. But if you're just looking at a gradient and not wanting to go too deep, up here at 400mm a second, it's doing pretty well, and we're still getting, you can just barely see maybe at that 10%. It's just a hint, but definitely from 20 to 400, or from 20 to 100 at the 400mm a second, still having that gradient. So this is all on the 30-watt setting. I haven't tested the 10-watt setting, and it's very impressive, very quick, and getting some nice variation in the grades. So, gotta say, I'm impressed with it. All right, so I did flip it down to the 10-watt setting for an engrave to kind of see what the difference is here, and I did also bump the power down to 75mm a second, up to 375 versus the 100 and 400, just to kind of compare them a little bit. And you can see definitely a lighter gradient up here, but this would also hopefully give us a little more definition. So looking at the 375, it is lighter in this range, but we still have a nice solid gradient there, and we do still have some depth down here at the 75mm a second. So this is definitely a hot laser for the 10 or the 30-watt settings, but it does give you some flexibility in the powers you run. Now, I guessed at my power settings for this cutting because I didn't do a 10-watt cut test on this. And I was at, I think, 5.5mm a second, and it wanted to get through. You can kind of see the top and bottom are cut there, but didn't quite make it all the way through. So would really have to dial that in, but honestly, for cutting, you're going to be running this on the 30-watt setting and not the 10. But I'm going to play around with it a little bit more, but hopefully Clack doesn't kick me out of here. And we'll see what else we can get done with this, and then maybe I'm going to show you a few of the things on here that I find to be maybe unique or done really well. So let's jump back into playing around with this, and let's see what we find. So I thought I'd do some quick engravings based on our tests. And of course, just the old standard. This is my Ventari's Workshop logo out of 3mm Baltic birch. And everything came out really nice. So the engravings even the lines, sometimes you get varying lines in there, but these are fairly nice and tight. So overall did a nice quality job on the vector engraving. So then I wanted to play around with image engraving, and I also swapped between the the 30 watt setting as well as the 10 watt setting. So started out on the 30 watt setting here, and this is just an eagle image. And this was run at 350 millimeters a second at 85% power. It didn't do a bad job, but really felt like I wasn't getting the detail in the face. So wanted to switch it out to the 10 watt setting. And here you see this on the bottom here. Got a fairly nice engraving out of that. Got a lot more detail in that face, a lot more contrast in the wings. And this was run at, on the 10 watt setting, 130 millimeters a second, 100% power. So these tests were just run with settings off of my test grid. So I wanted to give that 30 watt another chance, see if it maybe was a little bit better. So tweak the settings a little bit. This is 30 watt again at 250 millimeters a second, 100% power. It got a little darker and got a little more detail out of the face. All right, so here are the two side by side. The 30 watt is over here and the 10 watt is over here. Got a little darker out of the 30 watt. We were running this at 250 millimeters a second, 100% power. The 10 watt, we were running at 130 millimeters a second, 100% power. And both are pretty decent. It's probably not coming out on the camera that great, but I'm still getting a little more detail in on the 10 watt over here. So there's still some advantages to being able to switch that down to 10 watt, get that smaller spot size, and get a little more detail out of it. So kind of a cool thing to see on it. A number of the higher power lasers are coming with that option to step it down. And so there may be some cases where you might need to use that. So now this isn't a full review, as I'm just visiting Clack's shop, and I'm not going to tear this apart as I might other lasers and really dig into it. I don't have that time, but wanted to take the chance to get some first impressions, use it a little bit. And I know people have asked me my thoughts on it before, and this is really my first time seeing one, getting to play around with one. Clack let me hook it up to my computer and just test it out that way. So I thought I'd just really briefly show you some of the things I think are nice about it, my brief little introduction to it, along with maybe anything that I think could be improved. So let's start with some of the features on this. This is a really nice built frame. It's a fully enclosed frame. The corners are rounded very nicely. Everything's milled very nicely. This is not something that you'd feel is just hastily put together. I didn't do any assembly. I didn't do any unboxings, so I can't speak to anything of the parts that you need to put together. From what I understand, it's pretty much assembled out of the box. You remove a bar and plug some wires in and such. Set your honeycomb in maybe. So really, for an out-of-the-box experience, from what I understand, it's pretty nice. And what I'm seeing here, after Clack's used it quite a bit, it is a pretty nice laser. It is well lit. It's got some nice LED bars on the side. It seems to light it up pretty well in there. And so visually, it hasn't been hard to work with. The camera at the top does seem to work pretty well. It was fairly spot on in just grabbing the profile and going. And so that seems to be some really nice features there. They do seem to have a panel up front and back. This does allow air to come in, but continues to block that light. So they've definitely put some extra thought into the light blocking. I understand there on some of them, there might be just a slight gap on the bottom where maybe some light can come through. And that's probably only a problem if you have it lifted up like this. From what I heard, again, they probably have a fix coming for that shortly. The one thing that I've noticed in using it that maybe isn't so great is the fan constantly runs on the module. And so there's a little bit of noise, and you can perhaps hear it right now. It's not deafening. Now, if I open it up, it's definitely gonna be louder. But still, it's not deafening. But if you're sitting next to it, constantly working or trying to have a conversation, you're definitely gonna want to leave the lid down, and or you may find yourself turning it off. And as a matter of fact, I think I'm gonna do that right now. All right, so it's a bit quieter in here without having that running, but. And one of the other cool features that I really like is the honeycomb in here. So this actually is keyed into some posts down in the bottom here. So I'll try to get a close-up view of this, but there are some pegs in these four corners, and those align with these slots in this honeycomb. And so that locks this honeycomb in place. You can use this definitely to you really don't need any fixtures or jigs, as people call them, to get things set up. Because also in the corner here, you'll see you have these measurements. Now, on most honeycombs, all you can do with that is measure them out. Well, this one with those posts keys in to where 00 truly is the home point of your machine. And the cool thing here is, if you notice in this corner, we've got the metric measurements. Well, if you spin it 180 degrees, then now you've got imperial. So they're really trying to cover the setup for people using both measurement schemes. So once again, this does just lock back down in here. And once you find those pegs, that really locks in. It's not going anywhere. So that is a feature that needs to be done on a lot more lasers. Great to see it on here. I hope other people take note, and I hope that becomes more of a standard. Now, in this case, at the back, they do have a 4-inch fan. It's similar to like a PC case fan, and it does seem to move the air okay. Now, tell Clack this, but his setup over here isn't ideal, and I think he knows that. But so it's struggling a little bit in here. I noticed when doing some heavy cutting that it would build up a little bit of smoke in the case, but it would extract it out. If you're doing engraving on there, it seemed to keep up. But when we were cutting some heavier wood and creating extra smoke, that's where I noticed it kind of bogging down a little bit. But he does have the flexible hose that kind of curls down and then back up and over. So it's a pretty long extension, and it's not helping the situation here. So I can't really speak to how effective this is. The one thing that I don't know that is available or not is I would love to be able to swap that out with just a port that I could hook up to my standard 4-inch exhaust at home. So if I had this laser, I'd love to be optional. You can run that if you need it, or be able to remove it and just have a shroud that would adapt to a 4-inch hose. Maybe that's available. Not sure. Again, I'm just kind of getting my hands on this one, feeling it out, seeing what I think about it. But that would be something I'd love to see on this in the future if it's not available now. So one thing that I've noticed in using this weekend is the motion is very smooth. They do have linear rails on both axes that moves very smoothly, and the fast movements, the white space scanning, that seems to go very quickly. So it will cut in an area and move very quickly over to the next one if it's doing that, and it seems very accurate and precise when it's doing that. And that can have a huge impact on the productivity of your job. So it's nice to see how well that performs. The other thing is the focusing. They have a pretty typical setup. So you would have your material down in here, and they've got the 3-step tool here. So they have you as typical engraving or cutting up to 1/8-inch material on the top, and then they kind of step it down for 6 and 10 millimeter material. So it's nice that they give you a few different heights there, but you simply unlock it with the one thumb screw, and then this is very smooth, you don't have to spin it a bunch to get it up and down, but it still feels like you could really dial it in fairly easily. So you would just put your block underneath there, make sure that cone not touches the top, and then tighten it down. Then you can slide your tool back out of the way. So it's not an automatic focus. I am could take it or leave it on most automatic focuses. I've seen some do it well and some do it poorly. Having a solid manual focus like this, I will take that over a poor autofocus or even an okay autofocus any day. So I think they've done a good job on here, and I'd be very happy to have that one with mine. So over on the other side of the laser, Clack does have the air pump set up on here, and that does plug into the laser, and it is controllable through light burn, so you can turn it on and off by layer, which is nice. It's starting to become a standard on all of them. I like having some flexibility. Clack likes to use his relays with shop error as well. This is pretty much your typical pump you see with a lot of lasers. It works pretty well. I do like to have maybe a little more variability if possible. Sometimes you want to dial that up or dial it down. However, a lot of times I'm going to use to just running it full and just dialing my settings from there. So I have no qualms about it. It seems to work really well. The air system on there, even if the cone on the end of the module seems to do a good job of funneling that air down to the point of the cut. And even if you keep it off and do your engravings, it seems that the shape and the way that the airflow moving through the module does tend to keep it clean and not a lot of chance for smoke to back up in there. So seems to be some decent thought into the design of the module and the air system. And so love what I'm seeing here. I really don't have anything other than, like I say, I'd love to see a little more variability control in the actual airflow itself. Anyway, I've just had part of today to play around with this, and I want to thank Clack for allowing me to kind of jump in and borrow this. He said under no circumstances am I allowed to run off with it when I have to leave here in the next day or so. And so unfortunately, this is going to have to stay here. I'm going to have to travel the 1,100 miles back home. Hey, there's one of his cats. So anyway, that's about where I'm going to leave it. Just kind of wanted to get some of my first impressions out there. I know a lot of people have asked me about this laser. I haven't had the chance to play around with one until now. Am I impressed? Yes, I think it is a high-end laser. I think a lot of the hype that's around it is founded. Do I think it's the end-all be-all laser? It's not gonna, there's no one laser that works for everyone. There are always going to be things that maybe the laser doesn't fit for someone. You know, this one, you kind of have to buy into their whole system. You do pay a little bit more upfront for it, but you are getting most of everything that you will ever need with a laser of this size. You can take the bottom out. You can do work on some items larger than that, but like with any of the enclosed lasers, there are going to be some limitations in some ways. You may find some scenarios where this doesn't work for you, and you'll need something that's a little more flexible. But for 90% of what you're doing in this kind of hobbyist, small business size laser, I think this one's going to handle it pretty well. And so it's definitely something worth looking at. I think it's definitely something that if you've got the budget to step up into this laser right away, it definitely should be one of the ones at the top of your list. But there are others out there, and you know, competition always breeds leaps. You know, manufacturers are going to leap over each other with new innovations and new features, and so I don't want to see anyone go away. I want to see them continue to challenge each other. I want Lasermatic to continue to challenge Xtool and Atom Stack and others, just the same as vice versa. So hopefully this will answer some of people's questions, or what are my impressions of the laser? What do I think about it? I think it is a good laser. I would love to have one in my shop, and maybe in the future I'll be able to figure that out and swing one. But for now, it was nice to get my hands on one and play around with it. So Clack, thanks again for letting me take over part of your shop, let me play around with the laser, and be able to give people some of my impressions. If you're curious about this one, I will have links down below. They're not affiliate links or anything, but I'll definitely pass that on so you can take a look a little more at this laser. I will have links to my Etsy shop and some of the general items around my shop or Clack Shack that I use. Those will be Amazon affiliate links, and that is a good way to help my channel out, a way to help support me at hopefully the things that you'd be buying anyway, and that just kind of helps me out while you getting some things that you would be using anyway. So always appreciate that support, and but most of all, I just appreciate you all watching this and hanging out, checking out my videos, commenting on, and supporting the fun I have in my shop, that Clack has in his shop, and all the others out there as well. So just trying to continue to bring good information out to everyone there and keep the conversation going. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope it was informational or educational. And most importantly, hope you can get out to your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.